In 1972, a chimpanzee named Flint watched his mother die. Then he stopped eating, stopped moving much, went back to the spot where she died and just sat there. Within weeks, he was dead himself, not from any illness researchers could identify, but from what Jane Goodall described as grief. That case became one of the most cited examples in animal cognition research. And it raised a question scientists are still arguing about. What does a chimpanzee actually understand about death, and what happens inside one when it loses someone it loved? Goodall had been watching the Gombe chimpanzees in Tanzania since 1960. She named them, tracked them individually, followed specific families across years and decades. Flint's mother was called Flo, the dominant matriarch of the first family Goodall studied, old and distinctive enough that when she died in 1972, Britain's Sunday Times ran an obituary for her. Not a note, an obituary. For a chimpanzee. Flint was 8.5 years old when Flo died, older than most chimpanzees when they lose their mothers, but unusually dependent on her. He never really separated the way most young chimps do. When she was gone, he stopped interacting with the rest of the group, stopped eating, sat by himself at the place where she died. Goodall wrote later that he seemed to have lost the will to live. Within weeks, he died on that same spot. The scientific establishment at the time wasn't comfortable with that framing. Attributing grief to an animal, treating its emotional states as real and nameable, was considered anthropomorphic, the cardinal sin of animal research. Goodall had been fighting that criticism since she'd started naming her subjects instead of numbering them. But the data kept accumulating, and eventually the field had to catch up with what the field workers were actually seeing. One of the clearest recurring behaviors in chimpanzee death research is something called dead infant carrying. When a chimpanzee mother's infant dies, she often keeps carrying the body, days sometimes, weeks in some documented cases. A 2022 study using 40 years of observations from the Budongo forest in Uganda found that at least a quarter of infant deaths involve the mother continuing to carry the body, and because this behavior is difficult to observe in the field, researchers estimate the true figure may be above 70%. What's strange about this isn't just the carrying, it's the specific behaviors that go alongside it. Researchers from the Max Planck Institute documented a mother placing her fingers against her dead infant's neck, the location of a pulse, and then laying the body on the ground and watching it from a distance before picking it up again. She was doing something, checking something. The researchers described it as behavior consistent with testing for signs of life, behavior not typically directed at living infants at all. There are two ways researchers tend to think about why this happens. One says the mother simply hasn't fully registered that death has occurred, that the infant's body still triggers the same attachment responses a live infant would, and the carrying continues until decomposition makes it impossible to ignore. The other says something more interesting, that younger, less experienced mothers carry dead infants specifically because they haven't yet learned what death means, and the carrying is part of how they find out. Death, on this view, isn't something chimpanzees are born understanding. It's something they have to encounter and figure out up close, over days, carrying the evidence with them until the evidence itself gives them the answer. None of this settles the grief question. Grief as humans experience, it involves awareness of loss, memory of what's gone, anticipation of a future without it. Whether chimpanzees have all of those components, or some of them, or something structurally similar that doesn't map cleanly onto any human word, is not something the current research can confirm. What it can say is that chimpanzees respond to the death of those they're bonded to in ways that are sustained, specific, and in at least some cases severe enough to affect their own survival. Flint didn't die of grief in the clinical sense. He died of what grief does, the withdrawal, the not eating, the immune system running on nothing. The cause of death was biological. What caused the cause was something else. Goodall spent more than 6 decades watching chimpanzees live and die at Gombe. She believed they felt things. The science spent a long time arguing with her about that. Then slowly, case by case, it stopped. If this is the kind of thing you want more of, Something Stirs covers exactly this every week. Subscribing just means you'll actually see the next one.